My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Dean Shepherd, who is the Ray and Milann Siegfried Professor of Entrepreneurship at the Mendoza College of Business in Notre University. Dean has received his doctorate, an MBA from Bond University in Australia. His research and teaching are in the field of entrepreneurship, and actually he's the specialist in the theory of learning from business failure and in the theory of entrepreneurial cognition. He has received 3 honorary doctorates from different universities in Germany and Sweden. He has received the Dedication to Entrepreneurship Award from the Academy of Management in 2017, and he has also served as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Business Venturing until 2016. Welcome, Dean, and thank you very much for participating in this interview series and also agreeing to share your knowledge with us today.
Sure, thanks, Christina.
So Dean has a recent article published in 2020 in Small Business Economics that has received a very big impact. You have emerged as one of the intellectual leaders in entrepreneurship research. I would like to start my first questions by asking you to tell us more about your entrepreneurial journey, how it started, and how you have been able to be the research leader in this field.
Well, thanks very much for saying that I'm a leader. I just try my best and try and pursue topics that are interesting to me. My entrepreneurial journey started in Australia, and I worked a lot with a professor there called Evan Douglas, and we worked with a lot of the MBA teams in new business playing competitions. And so I started off my journey by looking at how do venture capitalists assess entrepreneurs in terms of whether to provide them resources. And so I used conjoint analysis. At Bond University, I was the second graduate from that school of business. The first graduate was an accounting professor, conjoint analysis. So I was able to learn from him and apply it to venture capitalist decision making. And then eventually I went on to entrepreneurial decision making. And during that time, my father's business failed. So I eventually went on and did some research about entrepreneurial grief and how to overcome the negative emotional reaction to the failure of businesses. And so that kind of led me from cognition to emotion, and then trying to link emotion to cognition. And I suppose, the journey's proceeded, and over time I've come to look at perhaps some of the dark side elements of entrepreneurship as well. So I suppose as I've got more senior, I've tried to think less about the standard way of thinking about entrepreneurship, and try to just think about, a different perspective, so if everyone's studying why entrepreneurship is so fantastic, maybe I'll study some instances where entrepreneurship may actually be bad or generate bad outcomes. And so really that's what I've tried to do, is I've tried to kind of challenge some conventional wisdom, and trying to challenge people's weakly held assumptions, and just try to keep my interest in the field that way.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us more, what is entrepreneurship for you? Is it entrepreneurship related to creation, to innovation, or even to failure?
Yeah, so entrepreneurship to me as an author is slightly different than entrepreneurship to me as when I was an editor. But I think about less about what entrepreneurship is as a field, and more focusing in on what entrepreneurship is as a phenomena, and study that phenomena that's of interest to me. So an example might be when I studied my dad's business failure, and we looked at grief, whether someone else would say that my father was an entrepreneur or not was not particularly important to me in the way that I did the study. I did the study because I was interested in understanding how these people who create businesses have a negative emotional reaction when those businesses fail, and how they're able to learn and be motivated again. So I was really less interested in whether other people would say he's an entrepreneur or not, but really just starting to study the phenomena. So early in my career, it wasn't long after Venkat had the chapter of what is the distinctive domain of entrepreneurship. that people would often sit around and say, this is what entrepreneurship is to me. And then someone else would say, oh, no, that's not what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is this. And I felt the whole discussion was kind of, didn't actually progress anywhere, right? So I was more or less tried to, with my entrepreneurship papers, just say, this is what I'm studying, this is why it's important, and this is what we learn from it. If you don't want to consider it entrepreneurship or not, it's not really important to me. So I was able to avoid that until I became an entrepreneur, and then, not an entrepreneur, but an editor. And then I had to decide that JBV is a entrepreneurship journal. And so therefore I had to decide what is considered entrepreneurship and what is not. And there I didn't want to enforce my opinion on other people. So I really just wanted authors to have the chance to make the claim or to make the case that this represents entrepreneurship and this doesn't. And I think in the end it's worked out well, because as time progresses, the phenomena may change. Right? So if I put a definition on it then, well, that definition may not apply now, and it may not apply in the future. So I think the entrepreneurial phenomena itself is very dynamic, continuously moving. And I like people having different perspectives and different ideas. And I think if we shed light in different directions, that's a good thing. And if an editor says, this is the perspective we're taking, then I think it narrows the field too much. So that's what I tried to do as an author and as an editor as well.
Thank you very much. And I found very interesting also this, we have a great privilege to have you here and share these insights about probably the historical evolution of the field and probably how this emerged the last 20 years. Was there any pillars, topics or discussion that increased the entrepreneurship research reflection?
Yeah, I think when I started, there was a lot of research on venture capitalist decision making, and I know that some authors like Howard Aldrich and people say that because we were studying IPOs and these high growth firms, he would always argue there are more studies on IPOs than there are actual IPOs. So in other words, maybe we shouldn't be starting on these kind of elite ones. We need to be studying more everyday entrepreneurship. So I think we moved a little bit away from that towards, for example, crowdfunding was a big hit. I mean, that was a change in legislation that allowed people to crowdfund ventures. And that also gave people access to a whole new set of data and therefore opened up a whole new research stream. So I think that was a change. I think the change has also been, we've seen more environmental entrepreneurship research, but particularly social entrepreneurship research. So I think as our students decide that they want to make more of a difference in people's lives, they look towards social entrepreneurship. And I think scholars are also people, and we also would like to make a difference in people's lives. So I think we're starting to see a lot more social entrepreneurship research as well. And I think that's a good thing, because it's opened up entrepreneurship from, more strategy-related dependent variables at the firm level, profitability, growth, survival, those types of things, to a range of different dependent variables like psychological well-being and societal wealth and the alleviation of personal suffering. So I think it opens up the field and it really brings life into it. So I think entrepreneurship is very exciting because it's continually changing.
What is your favorite topic or probably the solution? You were highlighting the social perspective of entrepreneurship. Is it from your research the most suitable perspective to explore entrepreneurship from the emotional or social entrepreneurship perspective?
Yeah. I think the topic that I'm always most interested in is the one that I'm working on right now. So that's always the most interesting to me. I don't want to say that my approach is the best approach because my approach works for me, but it doesn't work for other people, and we can make contributions in many different ways. So I'm really working on two major prongs at the moment. They're both related, but also a little bit different. I am focusing a lot on social entrepreneurship aspect, but more from the people that are involved. So rather than outsiders coming in and rescuing other people, I'm more asking ourselves, well, how do those people that are in this chronic adversity, or these people that have faced adverse events, how do they engage in entrepreneurial action to make their lives better, or make the lives better of the families and people around them? So it's less about helping victims, but about victims helping themselves. And I think entrepreneurship is a wonderful tool for that. And the other problem that I'm looking at is if entrepreneurship can be a tool for good, it also can be a tool for evil. Right? So people can use entrepreneurial action for negative, destructive outcomes. So I've started to look into that. I think the paper that I published in Small Business Economics has to do with corruption. There I started off by studying how do entrepreneurs make corrupt payments in order for their businesses to proceed. But what I found out was that the people who were being very entrepreneurial were the people inside government. The government officials created these independent, autonomous, illegal ventures within the large corporation government, slowing down government operations to increase demand for their corrupt services. And also, in order to avoid being caught, a new business was created of these kind of brokers that would broker the corrupt payment between the entrepreneur and the corrupt officials. So they're the two areas. The social entrepreneurship I've been looking at mainly in developing countries. I looked at the rag pickers, the people who pick up trash and garbage around the slums in India. And I've also looked at human trafficking and how they've been trafficking women into the sex industry, and how these people use these kind of entrepreneurial mechanisms to try and reduce people's autonomy. So using entrepreneurship as a tool for evil rather than always assuming it's for good.
And can you tell us which of your articles or books is your most favorite and why?
I think it might be the Academy Management Review paper that I wrote in 2003 about entrepreneurial grief. That's my favorite because it's about my dad. My dad was my hero. Unfortunately, he's passed away. But yeah, it was something that affected him very badly when the business failed, and affected me and affected my family. And I didn't write about what I had in the back of my mind for many years until I was at Colorado, and I thought, maybe arrogantly, but I thought, okay, I've got tenure. I don't have to worry about tenure anymore. Now I want to write the paper that I really want to write, and it's never going to get published, but I want to write it anyway. And that was the paper. I submitted it to AMR thinking, if I'm going to get rejected, I might as well get rejected by the best. And then they came back and said, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but we like the idea. And they worked with me and published that paper. And that set off a series of papers and a series of books. But yeah, I think that's my favorite one. Yeah.
Can you tell us, how do you choose a research topic? Is it the topic that chooses you? Is it you choose the topic? Is it the feeling? Is it hazard? So, and probably can you tell us how you can identify that a topic can become famous?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can never know that for sure. And when you start, I suppose it's like any entrepreneur. You have an idea, and you think it's an opportunity, it's a potential opportunity, but you don't know until after you've exploited it. Right? So, if we think about entrepreneurs, we say, pursue things that you're passionate about and you're knowledgeable about. Right? So it's the motivation and the knowledge. I suppose I look in areas where I have some sort of already knowledge about the literature, and areas where I'm motivated to do work. And as I look into those areas, if I see what I think might be potential opportunities, I just explore them further and further and further and develop the idea. So, one of the ways to do it is just to make sure that I'm not heading in the same direction that everyone else is heading. So often people say, what's the hot topic? Well, whatever the hot topic is, you shouldn't do it. because you're already too late to it. People are already working on it, and it's not necessarily a part of you. So I think, you know, what I've tried to, the ones that I've enjoyed the most is I've looked back on myself to say, you know, what's happened in my life that I think I might be able to bring to bear on my research, or, you know, what challenges the conventional wisdom about entrepreneurship. You know, what are those different topics that I can do? And if it feels exciting, then I pursue it. I do realize that I'm in a unique position now where I can, if I find something that's interesting, it's typically very risky, but I feel like I can take those risks. So I'm kind of in a unique position just to be able to, you know, kind of pursue the direction that I want to pursue.
This is one question I wanted definitely to ask you. If you are the expert of entrepreneurial failure, can we learn from failure and how we can optimize from failure? And probably for our research listeners, how we can manage and how you can manage from research failure.
Yeah, research failure is a good one. Yeah, so yes, we can learn from failure. So the saying goes, you can learn more from your failures than your successes. And I think the reason is that failure captures our attention. You know, so that negative emotion, that punch in the gut we feel, captures our attention, and we should be motivated to try and get rid of that pain or that negative emotion by filling it in with some sort of explanation for why the failure occurred. The only problem was that, you know, you say, well, you know, you learn from failure, but it's not automatic and instantaneous. There is some emotion, negative emotions involved, and they can obstruct our ability to learn from failure. So we need to be able to somehow manage or regulate our emotions to reduce them, negative emotions, so that we can learn from the failure and then we can be motivated again. You know, that 2003 article and some other things have talked to regulate your emotion by moving between a loss orientation and a restoration orientation. And so I think that provides some indications of how to do it. But as a scholar, I think I was a little bit unusual in this regard, because when I did my PhD in Australia, it was very difficult for me to get feedback on my research. So even when I got a rejection from a journal, I was excited because I was getting feedback on the paper. And because when I got the feedback, it gave me a chance to not only improve the paper, but then improve as a scholar. So it always gave me a chance to be able to learn. But I realized that not all people feel that way. That you know, you get a rejection, you might think, well, can I even be a good researcher? I mean, does this represent, you know, this is who I am, and all of a sudden they're rejecting my identity. So, you know, you can have a negative emotional reaction to that. And you typically have a bigger emotional reaction the more important the project was to you. Right? So, for example, your dissertation paper or something like that. So I know a lot of friends that do this, is that, you know, what you do is you look and you get rejected, and you get angry at the editor, you get angry at the reviewers, you get angry at everybody but yourself, because that's really a ego protection mechanism. Right? So we attribute the failure to external factors. But then if you attribute things to external factors, then, you know, what can you learn? And then you're learning helplessness. You're just a victim of this bad world. So what a lot of friends do is they do that, but then they put the reviews away for a couple of weeks, and then they come back and then they pull the reviews out and say, okay, now what could I have done differently? So that time allows you to first protect your ego, and then when you come back to it, the emotions aren't as strong, and now you can kind of sit down and start to be able to learn from what the reviewers said. So my default position is always that the reviewers is right, because too easily we can say, oh, the reviewer didn't understand, the reviewer didn't do this. It's too easy to do that. So I force myself to say, if the editor and the reviewer didn't understand it, then it's my fault. What could I have done better in order to be able to improve that? So I think that's the main way. You know, the other way I often start presentations about publishing is to say, in a room full of people, that I'm probably the most rejected person in the room. And I think, you might see that I've, had some papers published, but you don't see all the times I have papers rejected. And so there is a positive correlation between the number of papers you've had rejected and the number of papers you've had published. Hopefully your hit rate gets better over time. But, there is a base, a kind of unsystematic or unlucky basis where your papers can sometimes get rejected. You just got to keep trying. So I think that's how I try and manage the failure aspect of reviews.
This is great, and I have taken notes. So actually, choose to be risky, and also in order to be original in research. And the second, I have noted trying to manage failure in order to gain constructive and improve your research and your way to manage this process.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one question about the future. So what do you believe is the future of entrepreneurship research, and where do you believe that entrepreneurship research is heading the next 10 years? Or what interesting do you think you are going to be more interesting within the next decade?
Yeah, so, maybe the future's more, this is probably more a question you could answer than me, right? I mean, you and the younger scholars are going to be the future of the field. Hopefully I'm not done yet, hopefully I'm still kicking along. I think the current emphasis on social entrepreneurship, I think, is going to continue for a while. I think we're going to keep thinking of different dependent variables, different things that we're trying to explain, that entrepreneurship as a tool can be used in different ways for different things. I think Frederick Welter has looked at a lot of saying different contexts. So I think we'll continue to look at different contexts. I think Ted Baker's also said we've got to look more at kind of everyday entrepreneurship, and I'm going to buy their arguments there as well, that we focus mainly in the West and mainly kind of wealthy individuals engaged in entrepreneurship. But most entrepreneurship in the world is actually engaged not necessarily in the developed countries, and not necessarily with lots of resource slack. So I think we're going to keep exploring how does entrepreneurship occur in developing economies with severe resource constraints, perhaps in the face of chronic adversity or adverse events. So I think, those things, especially given that we've just gone through a pandemic, I think that's given us a recognition that we have to be able to learn how to deal with events. What causes the events? How do we prevent the events, or how do we respond to the events in ways that we can kind of either be resilient or that we can recover more quickly? So I think we're right on the cusp of going into doing more and more of that research. And so I'm not necessarily proposing that people do more COVID research, but COVID might be the context in which we can test some of these theories about resilience and recovery and adverse events and things like that. And there's going to be topics that we can't even foresee now. So I suppose we just have to be ready, like true entrepreneurs, that as the environment changes, we may recognize opportunities and be able to jump straight onto them.
Do you have any advices, or what advices can you give to young scholars that start their entrepreneurial journey? Any reflections taken from your own journey that could help young researchers?
Yeah, I think there's one thing, I noticed this in my friend David Holdrich. Whenever I talk to him about something, or anyone talks research to him, he goes, that's interesting. And I think the most important thing is to have curiosity. So, be inquisitive, be curious, be open to different ideas and different perspectives. I think too often we might focus on from this perspective or on this story. So we're so interested in developing our identity as an entrepreneurship scholar, which we should. But hopefully that doesn't bring a closed-mindedness and then such a super focus that we ignore, or we're not even open to these other ideas. So David's an amazing guy because he's such an accomplished scholar, but he always sees the opportunities in what other people are saying, and he can really see with curiosity. He approaches everything with curiosity. And I think that's the way to recognize research opportunities, is to be a little bit broader, to be a little bit more open, to be a little bit more curious. And the other thing I would say is, enjoy yourself, pursue topics that are of interest to you. So people might say, well, that's easy for you, you're a tenured professor. Take risks and pursue things that interest you. But I'm not sure we have another choice. I think even as someone who's untenured, you should still pursue things that interest you and pursue risks, because that's the only way that I think you're going to hit the bigger journals and have a bigger impact. Yes, that would be my advice. Enjoy the journey, because the rewards, you write a paper, it might be 3 years before it's published. So you've got to enjoy the process. And we know intrinsic motivation is related to creativity and innovation, all those things we need to be as an entrepreneurship scholar.
Thank you very much, Dean, for sharing your research with us today. It was a very privileged moment for me. I learned be risky, trying to manage and learn from failure, and then be open and enjoy the journey. It was a great discussion, and I'm sure that our reader and listeners would definitely appreciate this insight. And I hope to see you again in future interviews. Thank you.
That would be wonderful. See you, Christina. Bye.